I was 64 years old when I whispered those two words in my kitchen, and everything I had buried for 37 years came rushing back like a flood I could no longer control. My name is Eleanor, and this is the story of how a single moment shattered the carefully constructed life I thought I wanted. It started on a Tuesday morning in March, the kind of morning where the sunlight filters through lace curtains and makes everything look softer than it really is. I was making coffee, the same routine I'd followed for decades in our home in Charleston, South Carolina, when my husband Richard walked in. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood someone I never thought I'd see again. Someone whose face I'd tried to forget but never could. James, my first love. The man I left behind when I chose safety over passion 37 years ago. Richard cleared his throat, completely oblivious to the earthquake happening inside my chest. Eleanor, this is James Morrison. He just moved in next door. I invited him over for coffee since he doesn't know anyone in the neighborhood yet. The universe has a cruel sense of humor, doesn't it? If you're feeling what I'm feeling right now, hit that subscribe button because this story is about to take you places you won't believe. I managed to extend my hand, and when James took it, that same electric current I remembered from 1987 shot through my entire body. His eyes met mine, and I saw it there, that flicker of recognition, that same storm of emotions I was drowning in. But he played along. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Henderson," he said, his voice deeper than I remembered, but still carrying that warmth that used to make me feel like I was the only person in the world. We sat at my kitchen table, the three of us, making small talk about the neighborhood while my heart hammered against my ribs. Richard went on and on about the local golf course, the community center, the best place to get groceries. Meanwhile, James and I were having an entirely different conversation with our eyes. Every glance was a question. Every slight nod was an answer. "Why are you here? Did you ever think about me? Do you remember that night in Atlanta when we promised each other forever?" After Richard left for his morning tennis game, James didn't leave. We stood there in my kitchen, two people who used to know everything about each other, now strangers separated by decades and choices we couldn't undo. "I didn't know you lived here," he said finally, and I could hear the tremor in his voice. "When I bought the house, I had no idea." I believed him. What were the odds? But fate has a way of bringing things full circle, doesn't it? I poured him another cup of coffee with shaking hands, and we sat back down. The silence between us was heavy with all the words we never got to say. If this story is hitting different, make sure you're subscribed because it gets so much more complicated from here. "You look exactly the same," he whispered, and I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. "We both know that's not true, James. We're not 27 anymore." But he reached across the table and touched my hand, just his fingertips on mine, and suddenly we were. Suddenly, I was that young woman working as a paralegal in Atlanta, dizzy with love for a musician who played in bars and dreamed of making it big. Suddenly I could smell the jasmine from his tiny apartment balcony, taste the cheap wine we'd drink while watching the sunset, feel the way my heart would race every time he looked at me. "I never married," he said, and those three words changed everything. They shifted something fundamental in the air between us. I couldn't. Every woman I met, I compared her to you. None of them were you, Eleanor. My throat tightened. "Don't," I managed to say, but even I could hear how weak that protest was. "I'm married. I have a life. A family. 2 grown daughters, 3 grandchildren, a husband who was reliable and kind, and had given me everything a woman could want. Everything except that fire. That consuming, terrifying, beautiful fire that James had ignited in me all those years ago." He pulled his hand back, and I felt the loss of his touch like a physical ache. "I know. I'm sorry. I had to tell you. I've carried that for so long." He stood up to leave, and panic seized me. Once he walked out that door, this moment would be gone forever. We'd become polite neighbors who wave from our driveways and make awkward small talk at the mailbox, and I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear the thought of losing him again. "Wait," I said, and he froze. "Why did you move here? To Charleston? To this specific neighborhood?" My voice was barely a whisper, but in the quiet of my kitchen, it sounded like a shout. James turned back to me, and the expression on his face broke my heart all over again. "Because I'm dying, Eleanor." The floor dropped out from under me. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. "I have pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors give me maybe 6 months, probably less, and I realized I couldn't die without seeing you one more time. So I tracked you down. I bought the first house that came available near you. Maybe it was selfish. Maybe it was wrong. But I had to. Stay with me because what happens next will change everything you think you know about this story." I stood there, frozen, as he continued. "I don't want to disrupt your life. I don't want to cause problems. I just needed to see you, to know that you were happy, to tell you that loving you was the best thing that ever happened to me, even if I only got to do it for 2 years. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and fast. "James, You don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I'll go. I'll sell the house. I'll disappear again. I never should have come." But I couldn't let him go. Not again. Not when I'd spent 37 years wondering what if. "I chose wrong," I heard myself say, and once those words were out, I couldn't take them back. When I left you for Richard, I chose security over love. I chose my parents' approval over my own heart, and I've regretted it every single day since. James stared at me, hope and pain warring on his face. "Eleanor, you can't say things like that." "Why not? It's the truth. Richard is a good man. He's been a good husband and father, but I've never loved him the way I loved you. The way I couldn't finish that sentence, couldn't cross that line, not yet. The next few weeks were torture. James lived 30 feet away, and every day was a battle between what I should do and what I wanted to do. Richard invited him to our backyard barbecue. Our daughter Sarah brought her kids over, and they played in the yard while James and I pretended to be nothing more than neighbors. Every casual conversation felt like a secret language only we understood. Every accidental touch sent electricity through my veins. And if you think you know where this is going, you don't. Subscribe now because the twist is coming and it's going to devastate you. I started finding excuses to be outside when I knew James would be there. Watering plants that didn't need water, checking the mail 3 times a day, taking walks past his house at specific times. We'd talk over the fence like normal neighbors, discussing weather and gardening while everything unsaid hung heavy between us. Richard noticed nothing. After 35 years of marriage, he'd stopped really seeing me. I'd become part of the furniture, reliable and always there, like the couch or the refrigerator. One evening, Richard announced he was going to a 3-day conference in Chicago. My heart started racing before I could stop it. 3 days. 72 hours without having to pretend, without having to carefully measure the distance between James and me. "That's fine," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'll be okay here alone." The night Richard left, I stood at my kitchen window, staring at the light in James's house. I told myself I wouldn't go over there. I told myself I was a 64-year-old woman with grandchildren and responsibilities and a reputation in this community. But my feet carried me across the lawn anyway, and when James opened his door and saw me standing there, something shifted in his expression. "Eleanor." He breathed my name like a prayer. "I don't know why I'm here," I whispered, which was a lie. I knew exactly why I was there. He stepped aside to let me in, and I walked into his house for the first time. It was sparsely furnished, temporary looking, like he was just passing through. Which I supposed he was. 6 months, maybe less. The reminder hit me like a punch to the gut. "How are you feeling?" I asked, studying his face for signs of illness. Some days are better than others. Today is a good day, the best day in years, actually. He gestured to his couch, and we sat down, leaving a careful foot of space between us. Do you want something to drink? I have wine. I'm not supposed to drink it, but what are they going to do? Tell me it'll kill me. His laugh was dark, gallows humor, and it made me want to cry. Instead, I said yes to the wine. He poured 2 glasses, and we sat there, sipping it in silence, both of us knowing we were standing at the edge of something we couldn't come back from. Don't go anywhere, because what I'm about to tell you next is the moment everything changed. Do you remember the night we met? James asked suddenly, and I closed my eyes, letting the memory wash over me. The Blue Note, that little jazz club in downtown Atlanta. You were playing piano, and I was there with coworkers who dragged me out after a long week. You played Someone to Watch Over Me, and I swear you looked right at me when you sang it. Because I was singing it to you, he said softly. I saw you the moment you walked in, this beautiful woman in a blue dress, looking like she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. And I thought, I want to make her smile. I want to take that weight away, even if just for one night. You did, I whispered. You made me smile. You made me feel alive in a way I'd never felt before. My life had been so planned, so controlled. Everything mapped out by my parents, my job, my expectations of what a proper life should look like. And then there was you. This force of nature who played music like it was breathing and talked about dreams, like they were achievable, and made me believe that maybe I deserved to want something just for myself. James set down his wine glass and turned to face me fully. And then you left. Your parents convinced you I wasn't stable enough, wasn't successful enough, wasn't the kind of man who could give you the life you deserved. And maybe they were right. Maybe I couldn't have given you this house in Charleston and the security and the comfortable retirement fund. But God, Eleanor, I would have loved you every single day like it was our last. I would have written you songs and made you laugh and never let you forget that you were the most extraordinary thing that ever happened to me. I was crying again, messy and broken. I know you would have, and I chose wrong. I let fear win. I let their voices drown out my own. And I've spent 37 years living a perfectly fine life that never quite felt like mine. He reached out and wiped a tear from my cheek, and that simple gesture of tenderness undid me completely. James, I can't lose you again. I can't watch you die and pretend to be just the neighbor. I can't do it. What are you saying, Eleanor? His voice was rough with emotion, with hope, with fear. And that's when I said it. That's when I whispered, "Don't stop." And he understood. He understood that I wasn't just talking about his hand on my face. I was talking about everything. Don't stop looking at me like I'm still that girl in the blue dress. Don't stop making me feel alive. Don't stop loving me, even though we've wasted so much time, even though you're dying. Even though this is impossible and wrong and the most right thing I've felt in decades. Make sure you hit subscribe, because what happened after those 2 words will shock you to your core. He kissed me. Or maybe I kissed him. I honestly don't remember who moved first. All I know is that suddenly we were tangled together on his couch. 37 years of longing pouring out in desperate touches and whispered words. It felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. Every kiss was an apology. Every touch was a reclamation of something stolen. We moved to his bedroom, and I won't give you the details because some things are sacred, but I will tell you this. At 64 years old, I finally understood what it meant to make love rather than just have sex. I understood the difference between obligation and desire, between settling and soaring. Afterward, we lay tangled in his sheets as moonlight streamed through the window and reality started creeping back in. "What have I done?" I whispered, but I didn't move away from him. "You've given a dying man the greatest gift he could ask for," James said, pulling me closer. One more night with the woman I never stopped loving. It's not just one night. The words came out fierce, determined. I don't know how we'll do this, but I can't pretend now. I can't go back to my house and my life and act like this didn't happen, like you don't matter. James was quiet for a long moment. Eleanor, I'm dying. In a few months, I'll be gone. You have a whole life here, a family, grandchildren. Don't blow it all up for something that has an expiration date. Everything has an expiration date. I shot back. At least this time I'll know I chose love. I chose what I wanted instead of what everyone else thought I should want. We talked until dawn, making plans and then scrapping them, trying to figure out how to navigate the impossible situation we'd created. When I finally snuck back to my house as the sun was rising, I felt like a different person. Like I'd shed a skin I'd been wearing for decades and finally remembered who I was underneath. Richard came home 2 days later, and I couldn't look at him without guilt crushing my chest. He kissed my cheek and told me about his conference, completely oblivious to the bomb ticking in his own home. That night at dinner, he mentioned that James seemed like a nice guy. Maybe we should invite him to our daughter's birthday party next month, help him feel more connected to the community. I nearly choked on my water. That's nice of you, I managed to say. If you're wondering how I could possibly navigate this minefield, stay subscribed because this story is far from over. The affair, if you can call it that, continued 3 or 4 times a week. When Richard was at the golf course or tennis or his book club, I'd slip next door. James and I would sit on his couch, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Sometimes we'd make love, tender and desperate, always aware that each time might be our last. Sometimes we'd just hold each other while he told me about the songs he'd written over the years, many of them about me, about us, about the life we didn't get to live. I watched him get sicker. Some days he'd answer the door looking gray and exhausted, and I'd spend our time together just taking care of him, making him soup, reading to him, sitting beside him while he slept, memorizing his face because I knew I didn't have much time left to do it. The cruelty of finally getting what I'd always wanted just as it was being taken away wasn't lost on me. 6 weeks into our reunion, James sat me down with a serious expression. I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it. My heart stopped. What? Has the cancer spread? Are you? It's not about me. Well, not directly. He took a deep breath. Richard knows. The world tilted. What? How? Did someone see us? Oh God, James. He came to see me yesterday when you were at your granddaughter's recital. He walked right in and sat down in my living room, calm as could be. James's hands were shaking as he recounted it. He said he'd known from the first day. He recognized my name. You used to talk about me in your sleep, apparently, years ago. And when he looked me up and saw I'd bought the house next door, he put it together. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Why didn't he say anything to me? Why hasn't he? Because he loves you, James said simply. He told me he's known for 35 years that he was your second choice. That part of you never fully belonged to him, but he married you anyway because he loved you enough to take whatever you could give him. And now he knows I'm dying. And he said, James's voice cracked. He said he's not going to stand in the way of you saying goodbye to me properly. I started sobbing, huge gasping sobs that shook my entire body. The shame, the guilt, the grief, the love, it all crashed over me at once. I don't deserve either of you, I choked out. Maybe not, James agreed, wrapping his arms around me. But here we are anyway. This is the point where you need to drop a like and subscribe because the ending of this story is something you won't see coming. That night, I went home and found Richard sitting in the living room, waiting for me. We stared at each other for a long moment before I broke. I'm so sorry, I whispered. Richard, I'm so sorry. He patted the couch beside him, and I sat down, leaving space between us that felt like an ocean. I know you are, he said quietly. I know you've tried to love me the way you loved him. And I know you've been a good wife and mother despite it. You've never been cruel. You've never thrown it in my face. You gave me a good life, Eleanor. Maybe it wasn't the great love story you had with him, but it was solid. It was real. And I made my peace with that a long time ago. How can you be so calm? I asked, fresh tears streaming down my face. Because I've been preparing for this for 35 years, he said with a sad smile. I always knew that if James ever came back, I'd lose you. I just didn't think it would be like this. I didn't think he'd be dying. We talked for hours that night, really talked, maybe for the first time in our entire marriage. Richard told me he'd known from the beginning that I settled for him, but he'd hoped that over time I'd come to love him in my own way. And I had, I insisted, just not the way I should have, not the way he deserved. I want you to be with him, Richard said finally, and I stared at him in shock. For whatever time he has left, I want you to have that, to not live with regret anymore. But Eleanor... He paused, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity I rarely saw. When he's gone, I want you to come back to me. Not because you have to, not out of obligation, but because you choose to, because you realize that steady love, reliable love, that counts for something too. Richard, I can't ask you to... You're not asking, I'm offering. Go be with him, say your goodbyes, hold his hand at the end, love him the way you always wanted to, and then, if you want, come home to me. I moved in with James the next day, just packed a bag and walked across the lawn while the neighbors whispered and wondered. Richard told our daughters I was helping care for a sick neighbor, which was technically true. They didn't need to know the rest. Those final 3 months with James were the most beautiful and heartbreaking of my life. We lived like we had all the time in the world while knowing we had almost none. He played piano for me every day his strength allowed. We danced in his kitchen. We took slow walks around the neighborhood, my arm supporting him when he got tired. We talked about everything, our regrets, our joys, what we believed came after death. Do you think we'll find each other again? He asked me one night as we lay in bed, his body frail against mine. I think we'll always find each other, I whispered. In every life, in every universe, we're inevitable. James died on a Tuesday morning in August in his bed, with me holding his hand. His last words were, "Thank you for coming back to me." And then he was gone, and the great love of my life slipped away while I sat there, broken and somehow complete at the same time. Here's where I need you to help me. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment because I'm about to tell you the part I haven't told anyone else. Richard came to the funeral, stood beside me while I said goodbye, held my hand while they lowered James into the ground, and when it was over, he drove me home, not to his house, but to the one James and I had shared for those last months. You don't have to decide today, he said gently. Take all the time you need. But I already knew. I'd known for a while, actually. I loved Richard, not with the wild, consuming passion I felt for James, but with something deeper. Something that had grown quietly over 35 years of small kindnesses and shared history and the million tiny ways he'd shown up for me, even when he knew he wasn't my first choice. I want to come home, I told him. But I need you to understand something. I'll never regret those months with James. I'll never regret loving him, and there will always be a part of my heart that belongs to him. I know, Richard said. I'm okay with that. Are you okay with giving me the rest? And I realized I was. I could live with the ghost of my first love and the reality of my steadfast husband. I could hold both truths, that I loved James with a fire that never dimmed, and that I loved Richard with a quiet, enduring flame that had been burning all along, waiting for me to notice it. So I moved back home, back to the house in Charleston where I've lived for 3 decades, back to my husband who loved me enough to let me go and trusted me enough to come back. Our daughters don't know the whole story. The neighbors have their theories. But the truth is mine and Richard's and James's. carried between the three of us like a secret that somehow set us all free. I'm 64 years old. I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother. I'm a woman who loved two men and was loved by both, each in their own way. I'm living proof that life is complicated and messy and sometimes heartbreaking and occasionally, if you're very lucky, redemptive. But here's what I need from you. And this is where I'm stuck. Richard has been more distant lately. Kind, but distant. Last week I found him looking at apartments in Florida. When I asked him about it, he said he was just browsing. But there was something in his eyes, something I couldn't read. Yesterday I found a letter in his desk drawer. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for stamps, but there it was. From a lawyer. About divorce proceedings. Uncontested. Amicable. He hasn't filed anything yet. The letter is dated 2 weeks ago, just sitting there like a ticking bomb. Did I break something that can't be fixed? Did giving me those months with James cost him more than he let on? Has he been waiting all this time for me to choose him completely, and now he's realized I never will? Or is this about something else entirely, something I'm too close to see? I haven't confronted him yet. Part of me is terrified of what he'll say. Part of me thinks maybe this is what I deserve. But part of me, the part that learned to fight for love even when it's complicated, wants to save this marriage, wants to prove that choosing to come back meant something. That steady love does count. That we built something worth keeping. What would you do in my place? Would you confront Richard? Would you let him go if that's what he needs? Would you fight for the marriage or accept that some things, once broken, can never be fully repaired? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I genuinely don't know what my next move should be. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about your own choices and loves and regrets, subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to choose love, whatever form it takes. I'm Eleanor. I'm 64 years old. And I'm still trying to figure out how to love honestly in a world that demands we choose simple stories over complicated truths. Maybe you can help me write the ending.